Morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is a virtual hearing. With me today, Assemblywoman Nancy Muñoz and Assemblyman Antwan McClellan. The reason we're having this hearing is for the past 2 years, there have been absolutely no hearings with respect to masks, actually very few hearings with respect to the governor's response to the COVID pandemic. I believe, based on my history in the legislature, and I think my co-assembly people agree, that we've had hearings on things like the state bird, the state song, the state dirt, and the state candy. And with all due respect, I understand there's one party rule in Trenton, but it's so important to let the public speak. Now, we're not here to bash Governor Murphy. We're not here to bash the rules that come out of Washington. Everyone has a right to their opinion, and I believe there's a real pandemic here. But I also believe the public should speak. Now, apparently, there's been very few requests for people who support masks in elementary schools to speak today. So none of this was predetermined by us. We wanted every possible difference of opinion to be spoken about today, but unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of pro-masks people. We're happy to. When I say pro-mask, I'm talking about pro-mask in the schools, especially the elementary schools. On that note, most of today is to listen to you, listen to your opinion. But I would caution all of you: this is not a hate session. I won't sanction that. I won't sanction you lashing out against the decisions in Trenton. It's your opinion and why it's your opinion. And if we do that, I believe even the Democrats and the majority in the legislature and the governor will hear us. But if this is a session simply to gripe about what's happened, I don't think that's helpful. On that note, I'll turn it over to the conference leader for some brief statements, the Honorable Nancy Muñoz at Assemblywoman.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Assemblyman Bramnick. I joined John today because I think this is an important issue for the public to get a chance to have their views heard. But as John said, this is not an attempt to bash anybody. What we want to hear about is how this is affecting your children, whether it's the children that you are your own children, or the children that you teach, or the children that you supervise in the campgrounds. When we look at the CDC guidelines, so many of them were written in December of 2020, and so much has changed since then. 70% of the population of New Jersey has been vaccinated. And so we just want to hear what your thoughts are. There's also recommendations about being able to play outside, and that's what's happening now. So we want to hear from you. The other thing is, it's as we enter the hot time of the summer, the CDC guidelines recommends removal of masks during excessive heat. And how do you define that? And how do you make that determination? So again, we're really concerned about our children because and how it affects them. It's a mental health issue, it's a physical health issue, and we want to give you an opportunity to speak to that issue and what you think the impact is on your children and what your opinions are. Because again, we have not had a format to do this. So I joined, Assemblyman Bramnick and Assemblyman McClellan in allowing you to have your voices heard today. So thank you. Assemblyman, go ahead, John.
And before I introduce Assemblyman Antwan McClellan, let me just say, I've requested hearings for the past 2 years. We're not trying to do this in a covert way. I just couldn't get the legislature or the governor to have an open hearing on these issues. On that, I'll turn it over to, in my judgment, one of the most effective members of the legislature, the Honorable Antwan McClellan.
Good morning, and thank you, Leader Bramnick, for having me here. And I just think it's important that we allow the people to voice their opinion and concerns. Sooner or later, we're here to govern, but we're also here to govern for our constituents. And as you know, and as I've learned, we have to listen to our constituents, and we have to make sure that our kids are heard also. Our kids have been in this whole quagmire for a year, and sooner or later they have to come out of that. And I think it's great to have an opportunity to listen to their parents and also listen to the kids and see what's best for them and what's best for our constituents here in the state of New Jersey. So thank you for having me, and thank you for having this format to allow us to hear, what our constituents have to say.
Thanks, Assemblyman. And I've got my host here, Honorable Matt Gould. Matt, we're ready for our first witness. And when the witness appears, we're going to ask the witness to identify herself or himself, herself. Jackie, welcome to the first, in my judgment, hearing on masks in the state of New Jersey. if you would tell the people who are listening your name, where you're from, a little bit about your background, and then please tell us about your opinion.
Great. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Bramnick, for having me here today. I really do appreciate you finally letting us be heard. My name is Jacqueline Tobacco. I am here as a parent, and I'm also here as a member of the Board of Education of Middletown. However, my views, I don't speak for the entire board today, but I would like to give you both perspectives. I have been fighting this mask mandate since it was brought down. I do have a son with special needs, and it was very, very difficult for him to wear the mask in public before school even started this summer. And I personally fought this with my school district. It has been extremely debilitating to him to have to wear a mask in general. And then in school setting, he had been having anxiety attacks and high blood pressure and not able to concentrate in school at all. And so we were able to thankfully retain an attorney, and with a letter from his doctor, we were able to remove the mask from him since September. And he has been in school since September without the mask. However, I will tell you that it was extremely difficult to obtain a mask exemption. We were put through the ringer on that, and it was just a very, very difficult, lengthy process where we were really pushed back by the district. And this was prior to me becoming a member of the Board of Education. This was just me as a parent.
Well, let me ask you a question on that,
Sure.
because your son has special needs. What was the standard that your attorney or the decider of fact or trier of fact had to find in order to have an exemption to the mask? And now we're talking to those parents who have children with special needs. What standard do you have to reach that was actually supported by your doctor?
So it was very, very difficult. And I have to say that I had to disclose things about his medical condition that I would have probably preferred not to disclose.
I
to the school
understand,
district.
but the standard was because it had to be a medical necessity. Is
It had
that
to be a medical necessity.
These other issues are important, don't get me wrong, but if we keep it simple, then someone who has a child with special needs at least
Yes.
know what the threshold is in order to remove the mask.
Yes, well, the threshold has been, in our district particularly, has been you needed medical documentation. The doctors have been very unwilling to write notes, however. So in my case, my son actually had to experience anxiety attacks while in school, and they had to be noted by the nurses. I then had to obtain a doctor's note from his psychiatrist, and an attorney had to represent me. So it was a very costly process.
So it's your opinion that this threshold is very high, requiring medical certifications, medical affidavits, medical notes
Very high.
in order to remove the mask. So just for the people who are listening, that's a fairly significant standard. Just by getting the doctor's note, that wasn't enough for the board or superintendent to lift the mask requirement. Fair?
It wasn't. They also wanted their own district doctor to review my doctor's recommendations. And that's where the lawyers came in, because it was a very difficult process. And I will also say, just for clarification's sake, my son's special needs were not necessarily the reason or the underlying reason why he had so many issues with the mask. It was really a breathing issue and an anxiety issue.
So you believe that standard that you had to meet is a standard for everyone, regardless of special needs or not, requiring this significant medical testimony per se.
Correct.
In order, now you're on the Board of Education now.
I am.
What is your understanding of what your discretion is, or your board's discretion with respect to taking masks off? What is your understanding as a member of a Board of Education of when you or a school can change its mind?
So presently, our board, our superintendent has removed the mask mandate from our schools currently in Middletown. So as of just a few days ago, we are maskless in school, thankfully.
And do you understand that a board or a superintendent can do that without any prior approvals of the state of New Jersey, correct?
Well, we waited until Governor Murphy had made the statement. So he had
presently, so Antwan or Nancy, it appears, just so the public has an understanding, it appears now that local people who petition or are successful in speaking to their boards based on what Jackie's telling us, the local boards can make that decision. And I'd ask Antwan, Nancy, is that also your understanding or your reading of the latest edict from the governor?
So yeah, Jackie, thank you for your testimony today, because I think it's really important. And what I'm hearing from you is that you're taking it district by district, which seems to be sort of an overwhelming responsibility. So based on what you're saying, we should make a statewide policy to remove masks, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I will also clarify that the comments by Governor Murphy did not come with updated guidelines from the DOE. It was literally just a statement that he made in a press conference, and everyone kind of jumped through that loophole. It was more predicated on the heat, I believe. And so in my experience and as a parent and with all the parents that I'm affiliated with, everyone is very concerned about September and his comments continuing about returning to the masks in September. So a statewide policy would absolutely be more equitable as well, because
you're on the Board of Education. Have you had parents call you and say they want to continue the mask? Because we don't have a lot of the public willing to testify today, and we want to be as open and transparent. Have people reached out to you saying, I want my children to wear masks?
I have not personally gotten those emails. We have had the opposite in our community. We have parents who have been protesting, have been showing up at Board of Ed meetings, have been testifying, sending hundreds of emails so that they don't want the masks on their children. It is a choice.
Question, I apologize for being a trial lawyer.
It's okay.
What I'm trying to do is find out whether anyone contacted you saying, listen, Jackie, what you're doing is dangerous, or you're on the Board of Education, you should have everyone masked. I'm just trying to get a sense. And I think the answer was no.
The answer was no. So, I mean, I will say I had one Twitter troll, saying that we were going to kill children, but that hasn't been our experience at all. And we have been open full day. We have had the kids without the masks during lunch periods. We have been open safely since September. So, my answer to that is there has not been an overwhelming at all negative response to what we've been doing. It was overwhelmingly positive. And there is the choice. So there are still, children and some teachers masked, which is absolutely fine. And I think everyone needs to have that medical choice.
To wear a mask, your Board of Education finds that to be permissible, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to be very clear as well, the Board of Education in our district, and I believe in others, we are not the ones that are permitted to even make these decisions. We're not part of the Restart Recovery Plan that was put in place. It's the superintendent's decision. So our superintendent made these decisions solely on her own.
Yeah, I'm assuming that if there's unanimous position of the Board of Education, it's likely that your superintendent probably goes along.
Well, we hope so.
Assemblyman McClellan or Assemblywoman Muñoz, any final comments before we let Jackie sum up?
Well, I just want to make one comment, which I think is an important point that Jackie made, which I see in the public at large, which is those people who actually want, as John said, if I may call you John, the masks, for their children can continue to do so. As I'm out in the public, I see that. I would say probably 70% of people aren't wearing masks. The other 30% are. Maybe those are the 30% who aren't vaccinated. But I think that's a choice. Number two, I think that we need to get a consistent message, because some of the boards, some of the districts are making decisions. They're saying that the Board of Education, the Department of Health that represents Westfield and Summit is giving one guidance, and yet Middletown may be giving a different guidance. So I think that what we're looking for, and we're hearing from you, Jackie, is that we need a consistent message across the state that we have 565 municipalities, 609 school districts, rather than each superintendent, each district making that. We need one consistent message that says, if we should remove the mask, those parents who are uncomfortable removing them may continue to do so. There's no stigma applied, but it should be a consistent message.
Point taken. Assemblyman McClellan, any final comments? Because you're down in the south, you're down in Cape May County, the weather's a little different than up in the north in New Jersey. Any comments with respect to Jackie's comments?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Assemblywoman Muñoz said, it should be a sweeping thing throughout the state to allow the superintendents to make those decisions, as opposed to leaving them out in the wind to kind of maybe some superintendents will, maybe some superintendents won't. But I think, all the directives have come down, and this directive needs to come down and say, allow each municipality, each school district to make that decision to say, you're allowed to wear a mask if you wish, but we're not requiring you to wear a mask. And I think that's the most important thing, is that there should be no requirement for masks at this point, as the school year is coming to a close. And also we're in the summer and it's hot. So,
board member Jack, you pronounce your name just like it sounds, tobacco?
Yes.
Is there any, you were growing up with that name, or is that a marriage?
No, I married that name.
Did you have any hesitancy at that time to change your name to Jackie Tobacco?
Listen, you'll never forget it though, will you?
Absolutely.
It's a good point. Very good point. And everyone can pronounce it too.
Exactly.
There's no warnings next to your name. Right?
No warning.
Right, good. Trying to work on my stand-up.
Yeah, I love it.
You've been very helpful. Anything else you'd like to tell the governor? Tell him.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to just really reinforce that we also have to, go back to data. And I think, he always kept saying data determines decisions and dates, and we've kind of lost sight of that. So right now, there really is no data that's either proving that we don't have the intense community transmission that we maybe once had. We don't have any data that says masks are safe to continue for children to wear them 7 hours a day. We have had reports of kids with staph infections behind their ears from the mask elastic. We have had people complaining that their kids have migraines and headaches. So there's no data that anybody can show me that says it's safe.
I appreciate it. Anything else before we allow the next group? We have a few dozen people going to testify. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll just thank you for.
I thought you did a great job, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't know who's next because the host. Here we go. Good morning. Can you hear me? It looks like Christina, correct?
Yes.
Christina, would you tell us a little about yourself? It would be helpful generally where you're from. You don't have to give us any home addresses. Looks like you got a lot of sunlight in your house. That's good. Sunlight's good, I guess.
Good. Yeah.
This has a few questions. Tell us who you are, a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead then and give my full testimony, or just?
Well, no, tell us. I think the public like to know who you are. Yeah.
Okay. I am my name's Christina Walls, and I'm from Cape May County, and I am a mom of 4. And that's really it. I stay home with my kids. I'm a physical therapist, but I stay home with my kids to homeschool them and raise them. And
you are deemed to be an expert by the court. My wife, when she was home, used to say, I run a small company, transportation, psychology.
That's right.
I run a restaurant. So no, we understand the overwhelming responsibilities you have. Can you tell us a little bit about how these masks, one, have affected your children? And what would you tell the governor or the members of the legislature who have not joined us today as to your position?
Okay. Well, I've prepared something, if that's okay to read it.
That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you, Assemblyman, soon to be Senator Bramnick. I appreciate all of you taking the time to hold this forum. It's really important that these voices are heard. And thank you, Assemblyman McClellan, for inviting me to testify. As I said, my name is Christina Walls. I'm from Cape May County. I'm a mom of 4 children. I graduated from physical therapy school 25 years ago. During my 5-year program, I studied anatomy, physiology, child developmental psychology, physics, and chemistry, to name a few. I remember being in complete awe of God's perfect design.
Just 1 minute, okay? You know, Johnny Carson's show, and every show they said, never follow a pet, okay? Now, what's your dog's name? Because that's what everybody's looking at. And
it's my dog. He's playing with a ball by himself.
And that's a tennis ball. Okay, good. All right, what's the dog's name again?
Barkley.
Okay, good luck having anyone listen to you. Continue.
Thanks, Barkley. He said.
Barkley doesn't have a mask on.
No, he doesn't.
So, just kidding, Governor Murphy. Sorry. Okay.
All right. No, I'm not playing with you right now, baby. Okay.
And maybe in Trenton, we should, am I muted for some reason? Looks like I'm muted.
No, you're not muted.
In Trenton, maybe you should be able to bring a pet. Because
Yeah.
testimony is boring.
Yeah.
It's not boring. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He'd be
Barkley,
happy to join us.
I'm sorry. Christina and Barkley, continue.
So in school, I especially loved my psychology class and let me back up. So in school, I remember being in complete awe of God's perfect design, how our every artery, vein, muscle, nerve, bone, and organ, every system in our body, including our immune system, work together in a concerted fashion with our brain to make our body operate. How our heartbeat happens without us having to do a thing, or how we take a breath of air without even having to think. How God so perfectly designed our lungs to inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, all with a purpose. He didn't miss a thing. In school, I especially loved my psychology class and was fascinated to learn how a child develops. I have always had a special place in my heart for children. Today, I'm speaking out because of that love for children, my basic understanding of psychology, and how the body was designed to function. When we first began masking children, my first concern went far beyond the obvious concern of rebreathing the CO2 that is considered waste, or the possibilities of skin or lung infections. My concern for children went immediately to the psychological impact that this act will have on our children in both the short and long term. My concern went immediately to the fear that we were instilling in our children. Fear to be within 6 feet of a friend, fear of being sick, fear to breathe the very air that God gave us to breathe. I started wondering what these children would look like as teenagers, as adults, what phobias they may develop, what social inadequacies would exist, what emotional damage would become something that could not be undone. Children wear their masks because this is what we are training them to do. But what we don't see now is what we won't know until they are older. Children may be pliable with the ability to be molded, but that doesn't change the way in which they were carefully created with specific physiological, anatomical, and socio-psychological needs that do not vary based on what town, state, or country you live in, or what school you attend. From the time of infancy, children need connection in order to thrive. When this connection is disrupted, anxiety and stress occur. Children need to see facial expressions in order to evaluate a situation, learn language, and connect. In a British medical journal publication that I found, Dr. Carla Peters states that face masks prevent the mirroring of facial expressions, a process that facilitates empathetic connections and trust between pupils and teachers. This potentially leads to a significant increase in socio-psychological stress. During childhood and puberty, the brain undergoes sexual and mental maturation through hormonal epigenetic reprogramming. Several studies show that long-term exposure to socio-psychological stress leaves neuroepigenetic scars that are difficult to cure in young people and often escalate into mental behavioral problems and a weakened immune system, which you would think would be the last thing we would want to have happen. Face masking can provoke an increase in stress hormones with a negative impact on immune resilience in the long term. Another study by the CDC concludes that in young adults, ages 18 to 24 years, the level of anxiety and depression has increased by 63% since the corona crisis. A quarter of them think about suicide. As a result, the use of antidepressants has increased by 25%. Several researchers have shown a relationship between the increase in stress experiences and the risk of upper respiratory tract infections and mortality. According to Dr. Aaron Weiner, PhD, a board-certified and licensed clinical psychologist, the psychological aspect of masks we need to be most worried about for our children is that they internalize the idea that the world outside and the people living in it are inherently dangerous. This perspective can lead to long-lasting anxiety disorders and difficulty with our ability to function socially after guidelines are relaxed. A German study involving over 25,000 children reveals that major negative impacts on the physical, psychological, and behavioral health of children may be far more widespread than reported in the media and by government officials, affecting approximately 68% and contributing to 24 distinct health complaints, according to parent-submitted observations. Aside from the highly variable protective effects, World Health Organization mentions several negative aspects of frequent or long-term use of face masks. Many people report claustrophobic experiences, which I myself experience. I want to start panicking when my mouth is covered, and difficulty getting sufficient oxygen due to the increased resistance of inhaling and exhaling. This can lead to an increased heart rate, nausea, dizziness, and headaches, and several other symptoms. Personally, I'm hearing many of these same complaints from parents about their own children in my community. The World Health Organization has an extensive list of interim guidance on proper mask wearing. The following two guidelines I found to be most profound in relation to children. Number one, avoid touching the mask while wearing it. If the mask is accidentally touched, perform hand hygiene. Can you imagine children of any age having the ability to wear their mask all day long without touching it? Or can you imagine what a classroom would look like if hand hygiene was followed every single time this happened for every single student? Replace the mask, this is number two, replace the mask as soon as it becomes damp with a new clean dry mask, then perform hand hygiene immediately after discarding a mask. So if you have ever worn a mask, you know that it does in fact become moist. If you know a child, you know that in addition to the mask being damp from just good old fashioned breathing, depending on their age, they may also become wet from licking the inside. And in addition, you may find a wide range of other gross things, from remnants of peanut butter that was left on their face from lunch, to nasal discharge, otherwise known as snot, to bubble gum stuck to the inside because they innocently forgot and blew a bubble. Fact, research shows that a moist mask is a breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant bacteria and fungi, which can undermine mucosal viral immunity. I think we all know that children of many ages are not capable of strictly following the guidelines in place by the World Health Organization, and not being able to do so will set them up for infection, but not from COVID-19, from the mask itself. The World Health Organization has also stated that the use of a mask alone, even when correctly used, is insufficient to provide an adequate level of protection for an uninfected individual or prevent onward transmission from an infected individual. This entire narrative has been driven by inconsistencies. As my 9-year-old daughter pointed out, the fact that you can go into a restaurant and take your mask off when you sit down to eat, or more recently, our governor saying you are able to take it off in extreme heat, is all the proof you need about the transmission of this virus. How is a group of people sitting at a table in a restaurant different than a group of children sitting in a classroom? Continuing to mask our children is a huge risk, which could lead to irreparable damage, far greater than your wildest imagination. We may not have extensive or long-term data on the ramifications of the current measures being forced upon our youth, but we do have data and research on the normal development needs of a child. Mask wearing thwarts these fundamental and non-negotiable needs that children have to grow into mentally stable and healthy adults. What is happening right now in our schools is an experiment. This should not be an experiment that any adult would want to see unfold. We need to be bold and unmask our children. Children are carrying the burden of public figures, state and federal agencies, and certain politicians who seem to be figuring things out as they go. Children aged 0 to 19 years who have a 99.997% recovery rate from this virus. Children who have been targeted and who have been labeled asymptomatic carriers from the beginning, only to have World Health Organization and Dr. Fauci himself admit that transmission rarely occurs from someone who is asymptomatic. Those who are not basing decisions on true health science, but on political science with haphazard policies that change regularly, often lack logic, common sense, and which fail to use scientific research or the lack thereof as a basis, are placing the burden of harm on our innocent and undeserving children. We need to put the psychological and physical health of our children first and foremost. They are not pawns in a chess game. They are not to be at the heart of an agenda. They have biological needs that require pure oxygen, and they have a God-given right to breathe. Thank you so much.
Wow. You know what was, I don't know how many psychology courses you took.
I only took one, so don't ask me any questions.
Well, let me just tell you, to cite facts and to speak in such a astute way, this is why we have a hearing like this, to hear from people who did their homework, did the research, and simply want to be heard. All I can tell you is, that's just incredible work, and we're very proud. I'll turn it over to the Assemblyman McClellan because he represents you.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Ms. Walsh, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you and gather information. How are your kids doing now with dealing with this? And in Barkley.
Barkley.
Somebody's over the Walls house.
I think he's barking at my husband, which is funny, but yeah, my kids, thank you for asking. My kids are doing okay, but I also came from a place of trying to protect them because, like I said, the psychological aspect was my main and first concern. And I refused to let that affect them in that way. So I immediately went into protection mode, and I made sure they were still socializing with the neighborhood kids, and which obviously they were outside playing without masks, without being fearful of being 6 feet apart. And we really didn't go anywhere that required masking. I homeschooled them the entire school year. I pulled them out of public school at the end of last year, and for multiple reasons, not just the masking, but even with me protecting them, I saw my 6-year-old, we went to an art class, every Friday we would go to this art studio, and they would have to wear a mask to walk in, but then they could take the mask off once they got in. And he would get in, and I gave him one, around the neck. He could just pull it up and then pull it down and whatever. And he would refuse to pull it down once we got in because he said he was afraid of getting sick from coronavirus. And I had to explain to him, you have an immune system. God gave you this immune system. You don't need to put something over your face. Everything in your body, you have everything you need within your body to protect you from this virus. And so that, and that was like him being affected. I can't imagine if he went to school every single day and was having this play over in his head of being fearful and afraid and stay away from your friends and you can't go anywhere without your face being covered. That was his interpretation, and that wasn't me demonstrating fear at home, and he still was affected.
Well, you've done a terrific job. I want to alert you that Barkley took a sock and he's heading north.
Oh, that's his baby.
Okay. The reason is we have a few other people in the waiting room, but I have to tell you, this is not the last hearing we're going to have if we don't see some changes. Barkley want to say goodbye. Nancy,
Well, can I just make
Yeah.
make a couple of very quick comments? And thank you, Christina, because I think that there's a couple of points that you made that are really important, which are, number one, it's they have instilled this fear in the children. And the children, as you said, it's 99.997% likely that if they contract it, that they will survive. And this is a virus that has not, very fortunately, has not killed the children. I think the other thing that's really important here is that the wearing of the masks the children are, like you said, of your 6-year-old, he's afraid. They've been, for a full year, they've been told that if they go out without a mask, that something terrible is going to happen to them, their parents, or their grandparents.
Yes.
And so even as we move toward unmasking of the adults, the children are still hearing that message, and that's important. And the other part is about the normal development of a child. It goes not just into the K through 12, but it goes before that. As you said, I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. The language development is so behind, and I've seen it not with her but with all of the 2-year-olds, because when they're with their parents, but a lot of the parents are working and the nannies, they can't see, you learn to make words by watching mouths.
Absolutely.
And so it's not just emotion, but it's language development. So the long-term effects on their development, on their fear, and also finally the fact that you talk about wearing it properly, adults can't wear it properly.
Right.
They don't understand that wearing it like this, your nose is connected to your mouth. So how do we expect a 5-year-old to wear it properly when we don't have adults that can wear it properly? So
Right.
I think these are really issues that we must tackle about the development, and about also, we have to make a point about some people have an acquired immunity. We vaccinate 70%, but some people have an underlying inherited acquired immunity of their own. So we have to take all these factors into consideration. So thank you, because I think that how it's going to affect our children in the next decade is critically important, and that's going to have repercussions for all of our children.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
For years to
Assemblywoman.
come.
Thank you. Since we have some people
Thank
in the
you.
waiting room, once
Yep.
again, Christina, so really appreciate it. Barkley, have a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Vaccine 70%.
connecting to Christine. Thank you so much. If you would introduce yourself to the, I think, 500 people watching today's hearing, which it far exceeds a normal hearing in Trenton.
Hi, good morning to the Assembly, and thank you for hearing my testimony today. My name is Christine. I have something prepared. Is that okay?
Of course.
My name is Christine Binder, and I reside in the state of New Jersey. I am here today as both a retired elementary school teacher and a mother who is very concerned about the safety, physical, and mental well-being of my child and of all children. I am not a scientist and I am not a doctor. However, I am a person who actively seeks truth, reads both sides of science, has eyes and ears to observe and listen, as well as use my brain to think for myself and use discernment. I am here today to object to the New Jersey student mask mandates that are being placed on our children. I'm not quite sure how we went from 15 days to flattening the curve to having our children in masks for over a year now, but here we are. COVID came into our lives over 13 months ago, and our children have been in masks ever since, and this needs to come to an end. Every day when I drop my child off at school and watch him and all the children running around with masks on their faces, it breaks my heart. I watch them go from laughing and seeing each other's smiling faces to being socially conditioned to pull masks over their faces as they walk into school. This is not normal, and yet this has become socially normalized. Overnight, our children went from attending school in person and seeing their classmates and teachers' faces, as well as interacting with their peers at a normal distance, to virtual learning, wearing face masks, having to stand 6 feet apart with their desks, surrounded by plexiglass, and fearing what illness they could either get or give to somebody. Throughout COVID and even now, these children have been unfairly targeted as super spreaders of a virus to which there is no proof or science to back up this claim. Throughout this entire time, our children have gone above and beyond with what they have been mandated to do. I can honestly say that I have sat in awe and watched all the children that I know truly try to do the best with these mandates. However, that does not mean that they aren't tired of it. That doesn't mean that these masks aren't affecting them. That doesn't mean that they don't ask, how much longer do we have to wear this? That doesn't mean that their breathing isn't being hampered or their immune systems aren't being suppressed. And that certainly doesn't mean that this isn't making them sad, confused, anxious, or longing to desperately get back to the life that they once knew. I've heard too many in authority at this point say things such as, kids are resilient, or they'll be fine, or it doesn't even seem to bother them. Really? Children, or anyone for that matter, aren't meant to walk around with a mask on their face. God didn't create us with a mask on our face. And just because people and children are walking around with them doesn't mean that this is the way it's supposed to be. Children may be resilient in many ways, but that doesn't mean that they haven't suffered the consequences from all of this, or that they haven't been negatively impacted by these mandates. Many kids aren't fine, and we all know this. We all know that mental illness and suicide have greatly increased. In fact, suicide was the second leading cause of death among 10 to 34-year-olds in the United States, and our kids are in crisis. We all know that our children have witnessed and endured more over the past 13 months than most have seen throughout their lifetime. I truly pray that this will all make them stronger and more resilient in days to come, but we all need to move forward in order for that to happen. We need to get the masks off their faces. These children have shown remarkable strength and courage, and they should be commended for that, not punished more for it because they are going along with it, with what is being mandated of them. And if we as adults continue to stay silent, we are complicit. Our children aren't the ones that are supposed to be fighting for their freedoms, but our government is, and they aren't. Instead of fighting for our children's freedoms, Governor Murphy has taken away their God-given right to breathe and walk around normally, and this can no longer be. Children of any age aren't supposed to be rallying, sending emails, making phone calls to politicians, school districts, health boards, or giving testimonies, and they shouldn't have to because they're children. So it has become our job as parents to fight for their freedom. Children should be running around, laughing, being carefree, rather than worrying about getting into trouble at school because they're not wearing a face mask or fear that they may get their teacher or friend sick. What type of insane pressure and emotional abuse is this to put on a child? And how could one think that this isn't affecting them? And just because they are not articulating that it isn't affecting them doesn't mean it isn't. Having children walk around with face masks is dehumanizing, it's unhealthy, it's unsafe, and it's ineffective. And there is no science to back any of this up. Some of our children are running around outside in the heat during gym or sitting in classrooms that reach up to 80 degrees or higher with masks on their faces, while those making these decisions are sitting in their air-conditioned offices, maskless, and no one can tell me that this is safe or effective. As parents and a society, we are supposed to protect our children, not the other way around. If a car is coming down the street about to hit me, I wouldn't grab my child and put him in front of me to protect myself. The same way it is not my child's responsibility to wear a face mask to help me avoid getting a virus. The weight of that burden is unfair, as well as it is physically and mentally damaging. What has happened to our society is no doubt a shame, but continuing to have our children muzzled up like mummies is even more shameful, criminal, and abusive. However, if there are parents out there that still want this mandate for their children, well, then that is their choice. But I, as well as many as other parents, do not. And it is our constitutional right to decide what we want or don't want on our children's faces. In closing, most states, if not nearly all, have resumed back to normal, including the lifting of mask mandates for both adults and students. So why? Why is Governor Murphy and those in charge of making these decisions still placing these mandates on our children? And now saying that this may very well be the case in the fall as well? COVID numbers are at an all-time low in New Jersey, and our country is on the mend. So it is time to stop politicizing our children and time to start allowing them to breathe freely and return back to school normally without having to wear these unhealthy, disgusting, toxic, bacteria-ridden masks on their faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. You can hear the frustration of Christine, and that's why it's so important that the legislature hold hearings with both sides of the aisle listening and the governor. On that, I'll turn it over to Assemblywoman Muñoz or Assemblyman McClellan with the understanding that we have many people in the waiting room.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to add or have a question.
Just quickly about, I think that each parent has expressed the frustration and also stressed the effect it's having on their mental illness. I think we cannot let that part of the development of a child go by. You know, this has been about the physical transmission of the virus, which we have now, as Christine just said, got under control. So we must address the mental health issues as well. So I think that what we're hearing from the parents today is this overwhelming frustration that this is affecting the mental health of the children of the state who are not known as super spreaders, who are not susceptible to the lethality of the disease. So let's be reasonable on our policies. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Assemblyman?
I just want to say thank you, Ms. Bender. Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it. And we're definitely listening and trying to make sure that we make sure everybody else listens also.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cannot let that part of the.
Okay, here we go. Hi, would you?
Hi.
I see it says NIK, so I want to make sure that's your name.
Nick, yeah, Nick.
And where are you from?
I'm from Medford, New Jersey.
Great. Well, thanks for appearing today. Please tell us, your position on masks, what you think should be done, and hopefully everyone in Trenton will listen.
Oh, yes, hopefully. So I do have two figures here. I don't know if I can screen share, but I did print them out. So I can hold them up to my screen.
Sure, as long as they're G-rated, we can look at them.
They are absolutely G-rated. So I wanted to tell you, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm a medical biostatistician with 25 years of experience in phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials.
Just tell us what what'd you
A
say?
biostatistician?
Biostatistician.
Right. So what I do is I analyze the medical data. That's what I do. So I perform the analysis. I conduct experiments. So when you have a clinical trial, the first person you call is a biostatistician because you want to get a sample size for your trial. That's me. I help you design a trial properly. I help you collect all of the information that you need to collect. I analyze the data. I write up the results. I interpret the results. I review your conclusion, and then you publish. I'm also a published author.
It sat next to me in math class at Plainfield High School.
Yeah, I have actually a master's degree in mathematics.
Great.
So, yeah.
So we'd love to see your findings.
Right. So I think it's really important because you hear from a lot of doctors and you hear from a lot of other types of people, but I'm the one who's analyzing the data.
Good. Talk to us.
Okay. The first thing, I don't know if I can screen share or if it would be easier to, do you want me to screen share?
Sure. The host, Matt Gould, said you can screen share.
Should be able to.
Okay. Do you see that now? I'm
We
going to
do.
move me over so we don't see. I have a 3-screen situation here. Can you see it?
Remember, break it down. in
We can see it.
Okay, good. I will break it down for you.
Simple terms for us, okay? So everybody understands it.
I will absolutely do this for you. So first thing I want to explain is that pandemics are measured in deaths. They're not measured in cases. So if you keep on hearing about the cases in the pandemics, that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is death. So here I've done, and it's excess death. It's not regular death, it's excess death. If you have too much death beyond the normal expected death, I mean, it's sad that people die, but that is the reality. And if you're beyond the expected death, what happens is that you're in a pandemic. So you can see here that I did a graph from 2015 to 2020. I took this off the New Jersey SHAD database, and I graphed them all on this graph for you, as you can see, and I've done it by month, by January, February, March, April, and you can see by April, and this is all the data from the SHAD. I took each month and I put it on this graph for several different years to show that we were absolutely in a terrifying pandemic by April. And everybody was in a panic. But then we came down, and by July, we were not in a pandemic anymore. And yet we still continued to keep things shut down, not allow restaurants to come in. And even by July, we did the outdoor mask mandate, which obviously didn't do anything. The pandemic was already gone, but yet we continued to live this life and have businesses shut down because I can't tell you who's doing the metrics on this. It was pretty obvious to me that it was gone, but it did pick up by July. Not by July, we were done. By November, we picked back up again. And then here's 2021 now today, and we're on the path back down. And, you have to realize that when you're talking about pandemics, the first wave is really, really hard. It hits everybody really hard. And what happens is that people build natural immunity and people die. So there's less people to be infected by the virus. So it comes down. And then because COVID is a seasonal virus, which was completely obvious by June, it will go away and then we'll come back again and in a second wave. And you see how the second wave is way less than half of the first wave. And now we have, beyond natural immunity, we have therapeutics that are now saving people's lives in hospitals. And we also have 3 vaccines. So as we're developing, your decrease in death is going to happen just because of the effect of people getting the virus through natural immunity, through vaccines, and through therapeutics. So I don't even expect a third wave to even happen in November. I mean, anything can happen. I'm not the great Karnak. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you that we're down to here and we're out of the woods and there's less people to be infected. And one of the most important things is that this disease does not affect all people equally. There are different populations. And if you're in the older population, you have a higher risk of death than in the lower, like an extreme risk of death. And so I took the New Jersey data of all the deaths throughout the pandemic. This is children, school-aged children from 5 to 18, those who go to school, from January 2020 to May 2021. And these are the deaths that happened within that time. And during that time, 3 children died. Though it's sad, there's multiple other things that you can die from that we don't try to control for. Homicides, the children were more likely to die of a homicide during this period by 11 times. And we don't require them to wear Kevlar vests to school. Children were more likely to die of accidental injuries like drowning in a pool, riding on a bike and hitting their head, and getting in a car. And that was 27 times more than COVID. And we still let them get in a car when their risk of dying in a car accident is 1 in 7,500 in New Jersey. So their risk of dying in a car accident is much higher, and we don't prevent them from going in a car. This population is not affected by the disease. They have a near zero death rate, as stated by the CDC.
Let me ask you a question, because
Sure.
there's nobody here arguing for the so-called keeping the masks.
Right.
What about the risk of transferring from a child to, and I think Governor Murphy said it, to a grandparent in the household?
Are they vaccinated?
Who's unvaccinated?
exactly.
Well, then they should get vaccinated.
I'm not taking his position.
Right.
So-
I didn't think you were.
No, what I'm saying is that though children don't die from the disease, the question is they could transfer. And you believe the alternative is that is vaccination, correct?
Right, but I don't know how much they transfer. What's his data on that? See, I like to hear numbers.
No,
I don't like to hear they do. I like to hear the number. I want to know the number.
No, I just know if you had any data on.
It's rare.
Okay.
It's rare. It's very rare for children to get this disease to anyone else. And in the schools, the only ones who were transferring the disease to other people were the teachers.
Well, your point is well taken in terms of the risks to children, clear.
Yeah.
Anything else globally as relating to masks and children
Yeah.
that you'd like to speak to both the governor, the legislature, and to the public?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to be clear, though, is that the intervention that's trying to happen with trying to figure out some way to prevent children from getting sick is unnecessary because they don't already get sick by the nature of this disease. So, when we started this entire pandemic, you had an emergency use for different types of therapies because we were in a panic and it was a very high death rate. So we had remdesivir, convalescent plasma, the 3 vaccines, and masks. Okay, emergency use is used to expand the patient population's choices of medications. Emergency use is not to be used for the government to force patients to use a product like masks. It's not for that. The FDA never recommended any of these things. And the CDC only made a recommendation as you should. They didn't say force your population to use this untested experimental product called masks. They did not do that. No one gave them authority to do this. This was their decision and no one recommended that.
Here's what we're gonna do. We have to stay on the mask with children today, right?
Right.
And I understand, look, you're obviously incredibly well-read, you have experience, but we're going to have other hearings. We have people in the waiting room. So once again, the conclusions are great. And But go ahead.
But you need to know that it's an experimental product and no one gave consent. You're forcing the schools you're doing something that's very unethical here. You're forcing children to use an experimental product that has no safety data in the population and no effectiveness data.
And you're talking about the vaccine at this time.
No, I'm talking about the mask. I'm not talking about the vaccine. No, I'm talking about the mask. That's an experimental product. It's experimental under emergency use. Just like the vaccine is, but the mask is experiment. It's an experiment that you're doing on kids right now without any oversight board, without anybody watching the adverse events in children, without any reporting to the public on how these masks are affecting kids. When people ask, well, what are the effects on kids? I don't know. You're the one conducting the experiment. You tell me. You're the one who's forcing the children to use this experimental product called masks. You tell me what the safety data is. There is no safety data. The last study that was done on the largest clinical trial, which is the clinical, I'm not talking about vaccines. This is all about masks.
So therefore, you would ask the governor who's actually signed the order, or should I say, has signed this executive order, right? That you would say, where's the statistics based on true research with respect to masks and children, correct?
Right, but the thing is that you didn't, they're doing this experiment on these masks in the schools, and the parents didn't sign a consent form for their children to agree to be part of this. And there's no data. The largest study that was done was in Denmark. It had 4,800 subjects in it, and those 48 subjects were randomized to mask, no mask. There was no difference in the disease rate between children, no mathematical difference, no statistical difference between the population that wore masks and the population that don't. The masks do not protect the wearer at all. You're forcing children to wear a mask that does not.
Your point, I'm sorry, your point is very good and well taken. I just don't want to continue on that point with the people. You've made your point, and your point is there's no statistic to support the mask, and it's an experiment.
Right, it's an experiment, but you know who's collecting the data? The nurses are. The nurses are collecting the data. All of the public school nurses have all of the safety data. We need to get them to start publishing these records of these adverse events that are happening.
That's also a great point, and that's why we're having the hearing. That's
yes.
a brilliant point.
But who's collecting it? Like you have the data. Where is it? The public needs to see it.
Absolutely.
And who's responsible for the children wearing the masks properly? The teachers aren't trained to put them on their face and make sure that they're not wet, and then they change them frequently, and they wash their hands before they touch their face. No one's doing any of this. You're conducting this experiment in the schools. You don't have the right professionals putting the masks on the kids and making sure their use is properly, and you're not collecting their adverse events. This is not good for those kids. It's not good at all. And you'll hear about there's tons of side effects, migraines, headaches, that people complain about, impetigo, bacterial infections, nausea, and not to mention the mentally unhealthy side effects of anxiety and depression.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's such a good point. I think the legislature, and I think the three members listening, should call upon, we should have school nurses testify before a committee as to what they've seen as a result of young children or even older children wearing masks. It's a really good point.
Yes, and their parents too, because their parents are the ones taking them to the doctor's office, and the schools don't seem to offer any exemption. You have to fight for your exemption to get a mask off your child when your child has canker sores in their mouth from wearing the mask, and you can't, nobody wants to write the doctor's note, and they have the sores, they know it's from the mask or the sinus infection that your child has, and they're like, no, wear the mask. Because why? They don't work. This population isn't at risk for death or hospitalization.
Your testimony is really good. My only concern here is that we've had 3 people in an hour, and we've got these people in the waiting room. Your points are terrific. Is there any other broad global point you want to make? Because I think the points you've made are terrific.
Because I want to know who's accountable for this clinical trial. Is it Judy Persitelli? Is it her? Is it?
Well, that's the question. Remember, we don't have the governor sitting here, and we don't have the Democratic majority that actually makes the laws in the state of New Jersey. But these kind of questions are ones that I'm hoping the media will ask the governor.
Yes.
At the next press conference. That's why we're doing it.
Yes. Somebody needs to ask him who's conducting this clinical trial on children in school.
We got that. Exactly. Your points are well taken. What other global point? We don't want to repeat the same point and keep people in the waiting room. You made your point. And
it's just the negative. The only point I have is that the negative side effects grossly outweigh the benefit of the mask.
No doubt in terms of your testimony today. Anything else you want the governor or majority in the legislature to answer that you believe that you have not already told us?
Well, they should also be accountable for the additional deaths that they caused for implementing their policies, because I have data to show that there are effects from the policies that they've implemented all along through this.
And you have raised that issue, and I think that's been clear based on the statistics and the risk factor as well. Anything else you want to add?
That's it.
Well, I appreciate it. Assemblywoman, Assemblyman.
Nick, I just want to say good job. I think that you demonstrated by data we talked about data-driven decisions, and I'm looking at your graph here and the pandemic and the flattening of the curve. I think it's excellent. I think that you're showing the numbers here. And, to John's point about to your point about the masks, I was a volunteer tester from day one. We got fit tested for masks. So you're right. It diminishes the transmission, but it doesn't eliminate the transmission. So I think that's an excellent point.
I don't even know if it does that because I don't see any evidence of that. That there has to
Assemblyman.
be some data evidence.
Assemblyman,
Excellent. Thank you.
add anything?
Nick, thank you for your time. All your points are great, and
Sure.
it's good to see the actual physical numbers to kind of know that there's actual data to drive those points that we're trying to bring across. So thank you very much for your time.
Great work. Okay. I still have the share screen up. So,
Oh, you want me to undo that?
oh, I think our host can do that.
I took a picture, so thank
There
you.
we go. Oh, look at this. The Wiener Law Group. All right.
Oh, wow. That's a corporate law office.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see if I can
We see you. We see you.
unmute
All we
myself.
have is the name of the law firm.
I don't have I don't know why I can't see you.
Okay.
Hmm.
See, we hear you
Okay, well,
We hear
that's all,
you.
and you look.
that's all positive. Am I far away? I don't know why.
Yes.
It's okay.
Okay.
Just identify yourself because
All right. Good. Well, good morning, John and everyone. It's Gwyneth Murray Nolan from Wiener Law Group. I don't know why I can't be seen. Oh, here we go. There I am. Perfect. Let me zoom in.
Look at that. Ready?
There we go. All right. Technology at its finest.
This must be for the virtual trials. Okay.
No, yeah, I hope not. I don't want to do any of those. All right. Good morning. Thank you, John Bramnick, Nancy Muñoz, and Antwan McClellan for having me this morning. I am a mother to two children, two sons in Cranford, New Jersey. My youngest is in kindergarten and entering first grade in the fall, and my oldest is in second grade, and he will be in third grade in the fall in Cranford. And I'm in a somewhat unique position because my youngest being in kindergarten, kindergarten's different than when we were all in kindergarten. In kindergarten now, children learn to read, or they're supposed to, which is, it's no longer just fun in kindergarten. Now it's very serious. And my oldest son has special needs. He is on the autism spectrum, and he has sensory processing disorder and ADHD. So this year brought multiple challenges for my household and my children. Because of the mask, my kindergartner did not learn to read the way he was supposed to. Phonics is critical to reading. And with my son's teacher's face covered up, he couldn't see the way to pronounce words. The SH sound, sh, the TR sound, truck. You have to see a face to be able to learn to read. And the children coming out of kindergarten are supposed to be at a D level reading. I don't know how long it's been since you all have had small children. But my son is at a B level reading, and talking to a lot of the parents of young kindergartners, this has been problematic across the board. I don't know how this has become a political issue. To me, mask wearing in school for children is an educational issue. It's strictly an educational issue. I don't know how children are supposed to learn these most basic things about school, like reading, like interacting with peers, with faces covered. My son not being able to see the shape of a teacher's mouth was critical this year. And for him being the youngest on the younger end, in kindergarten where real learning starts to take place, it deeply affected his ability. And I know there's been a lot of talk amongst parents and teachers and about this whole year or this whole 16 months being just a loss in some ways. And I don't mean that to criticize our teachers, because I firmly believe that Cranford has some of the hardest working teachers and the best teachers that I've ever come across. But I think that masking our teachers made it incredibly difficult for them to teach, and masking our kids made it incredibly difficult for them to learn this year. I also think that from an emotional standpoint, it made it very difficult for children to make friends. How can you make a friend when you don't see their face and you don't know how they're feeling about what you're saying? Kids in these, younger grades and even older grades, but they joke around and they try to find an emotional connection with someone. And that was taken from our kids over the course of this past year. And I don't want to reiterate the testimony of everyone else that's already provided statistics and so forth. But I'm just speaking from a personal level as a parent for what's happened with my own kids and the frustration that they have felt with an inability to make those connections in school that make kids want to go to school. Now, I'm a lawyer, so I went to a lot of school, right? So I want my kids to have that love of learning, and to want to go to school every day. And this year, my kids didn't want to go to school. They felt a real disjointedness from school. And I think that was because they couldn't make those emotional connections with their friends and with their teachers. And a lot of that had to do with the inability to see the expression on their teacher's face and the expression on their friends' faces. Their teachers couldn't show the joy they felt, the pride they felt if a kid was doing well, accelerating or learning something or grasping a concept. My youngest son in kindergarten has canker sores inside his entire mouth and on his lips. We couldn't get his pediatrician to send a note about the mask being the cause. She said straight out, it's the mask. And I know other parents have said this, but how do you stop a child from licking the inside of a mask? It's not something that they comprehend. I can say, honey, you can't do this. This is what's causing, your sores, but it's a viral condition. And now he's going to have it for life. And it was caused this year. And it's painful. My little son had sores inside of his lip that were bleeding. And he was crying, staying awake at night. And as a mother, that's heartbreaking. And he doesn't want to put on a mask to go to school. No, mommy, no, the doctor told me this is why. And don't I not have to wear a mask now? Don't I not have to wear a mask in school? The doctor told me this is why I have the sores in my mouth. 8 sores at once inside his little tiny mouth. And he loves to eat like an orange. He couldn't eat. It was burning the inside of his mouth. So I just have a hard time with stating that this is in any way positive for our children when we know schools haven't been super spreaders. Cranford schools have been open every day, although a half day since last September. We took off 2 weeks after each vacation period in case families were getting together for Christmas, Thanksgiving, spring break. And I had no issue with that in case families were together and there was potential for COVID to be spread. At this point, though, I don't feel that there is any issue. There's no reason our children should be masked in school. And in the fall, after we've had summer and time for this virus to dissipate, there should be no reason for masking in school. Now, my third grader, or my incoming third grader, John Patrick, has special needs, as I mentioned. Because of his sensory processing disorder, he does not like things touching his face. He is very skittish about people even touching him. We worked with him all summer in anticipation of him wearing a mask over his face in September. He worked with his occupational therapist on this issue. And because of his autism spectrum, he relies on other clues such as body language to interpret the actions and behaviors of others. He has a lot of difficulty interpreting social skills and emotional cues of others. So facial expressions are extremely important for his learning and his education. And I don't know how he is receiving a fair education as he's required to under his IEP when he has his special education teachers, his regular classroom teacher, his occupational therapist and physical therapist, all masked. He's not getting the feedback that he's required to under his educational plan.
Gwen, I have a question for you because we do want to have some solutions today.
Absolutely.
First, let me just say that your testimony is striking, and it's so sad that, especially the testimony as to the SOARs, that the legislature and the governor has not heard this. So let's talk about, I think myself, Assemblywoman Muñoz and Assemblyman McClellan, I think emergency legislation, if a doctor writes a note and the doctor's note will be final with respect to a decision as to masks, is the doctor unwilling to write it because the doctor fears of some reprisal or that some comment from the medical society? Why wouldn't the doctor write that letter for you?
I think it's something along the lines of going against what the governor's office has said. I mean, that's basically what our pediatrician's office told us, is that masks in school are mandatory and there's nothing that a note will do to overcome that.
So I think, and I think we can agree that I think we should call upon the legislature. And I think it's only fair to allow experts such as doctors to issue a note, as long as this, especially since the governor's talking about continuing masks until September and next year.
Crazy.
I think that legislation, I think we need bipartisan legislation that a doctor's note is the final determination as to whether a child should wear a mask. Willing to introduce that legislation. Didn't want to interrupt, but we do want to try to help this situation out. And unless there's any objection, we'll get office of legislature. You're still muted, Nancy Muñoz.
What I was going to say, John, and to you, Gwyneth, is that I think that some of the prescribers are afraid of a possible litigation. So, John,
Right.
I think that we talked about like a protection for those in the nursing homes, et cetera, et cetera. There should be a protection for the pediatricians and all the healthcare providers, because they have to make individual decisions. So much of what the canker sores are related to anxiety as well. It's they have flare-ups because of anxiety, and we've heard so far from 2 parents with special needs children whose children are really suffering. So and we're hearing that the healthcare providers aren't being heard or are afraid of the repercussions. So I think what we have to do is have that immunity from lawsuits, so that they can make the best medical decisions. Because John, I think you've made that point over and over throughout your career in the assembly, is that it's the professionals should be making decisions, and we have an inconsistent message coming from the top, and they're hearing this and they're so afraid of that litigation. So I think that's also part of that solution.
Assemblyman, any comment on that?
Yes, I'm in 100% agreement with you. Ms. Nolan, thank you very much for your testimony. We've heard earlier that, somebody had to hire an attorney for a special needs child to be able to go to school without a mask. And, not to say anything bad to the attorneys here, but that's just pretty much a waste of time for you to have to go to fight for some parent to allow their child that has a medical issue to have to worry about wearing a mask to school. When that was supposed to be the whole premise, is that, if you had a medical condition, then you weren't required to wear a mask, which is very strange, because if you have a medical condition and you don't have to wear a mask, then you're protected from the virus or you're not protected from the virus. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but we need to make sure that we protect those professionals so they can make those right decisions to protect our children. And that's the most important thing, is we have to protect our children and going forward for them. So Ms. Nolan, thank you very much for your testimony. It's greatly appreciated.
Gwen, do you want to add anything, any global issue here? Once again, it's incredible that this kind of testimony hasn't been heard before the legislature. Anything else you want to add?
It is. No, I just, in terms of my special needs son, I'm echoing the sentiments of the other parent who testified. I know he has suffered from extreme irritability, which he already has as a result of his autism and his ADHD, but it's significantly worse. His sensory processing, he hates having he doesn't even like to be touched, put it that way. It's part of his issue, but having his face covered, it was a challenge to get to that point. It's a challenge to keep his face covered. And we tried to make it a point where he shouldn't need to have his face covered as part of his IEP, and it was rejected. So, but again, I think it's not about his special needs necessarily. It's an educational issue for me. It's about the fact that because of his disability, he requires facial expressions as part of his learning process. And I think that's all of our kids. But
Right.
in
And
particular,
as you said, reading and language development. It's like,
Right.
It's not just both. Thank you.
Well, hopefully the governor will hear that and amend
Mm-hmm.
an executive order. Remember,
Right.
we'd like to do it right now.
of course,
We'd like to do it right now, but hopefully, because once again, we want the governor, others to hear what you have to say. And
Right.
I deeply believe when they don't hear it, they don't react. And when they do hear it, I can hope they'll react. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
no, I really appreciate this so much. Thank you so much, John, Nancy, Antwan. This is terrific. And
Thank you.
it's
Really
so
appreciate
greatly
it.
appreciated. Thank you for providing a platform for this. This is really wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and for all this, and for all the other parents that are testifying today. Thank you for coming forward and for helping to protect and educate our children.
Hopefully we can help. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. We're still in the morning. And if you
Hi.
would tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, so how are you? Sorry, let me just get.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay. Hi, good morning. My name is Donna, and I live in New Jersey. And I really appreciate and thank you to the Assembly for listening to my testimony. So I wrote something down. I have memories from my first day of pre-K. I clutched my mom's hand and shyly entered the classroom. It was full of art supplies, books, costumes, and reading areas. But most importantly, it was greeting me with my smiling teacher. She took my hand gently and reassured me that we're going to have so much fun learning together. When I became a mother, I couldn't wait to give my first son, Ari, the same magical experience. His first day of pre-K was met with vast difference. Utter chaos. Masked teachers, masked 4-year-olds, face shields, sterilized counters, in a word, fear. He was afraid. He cried. He could not read his teachers' faces. He couldn't see their smiles, and he couldn't feel their reassurance. My husband and I were horrified. We put on a brave face for him. We came home, we hugged, and we both shed a few tears for this experience. Eventually, the school year settled into this strange new normal, and he dealt with the breathing obstruction like a champion. I'm so proud of him for sticking through this experience with nothing but resilience and understanding. We didn't know much about COVID when this began. So the theatrics of masking these small children who are wearing fake cloth masks, even debunked by Dr. Fauci himself for efficacy against an aerosolized virus, loosely draped across their faces, not effective N95s. An obsession with sterilization of countertops was somewhat understandable. Fast forward to 15 months later, my son asks me, Mom, you and Dad and my teachers, you got the shot. Why do I need to wear the mask? I'm hot. I'm nauseous. My cheeks are red. And I don't know what to tell him. I'm vaccinated. The teachers are vaccinated. Our community is vaccinated. So I want to ask the question that I've asked my local school board multiple times. How many outbreaks have occurred from small children in the classroom to vaccinated teachers? Nobody can tell me the answer because the answer is probably zero. Instead, we're told to be quiet, mask our kids, listen to the science, worship at the altar of Dr. Fauci, and continue living this way. The fact is that children's risk from severe COVID is minuscule, less than 1% to be exact. The fact is that our teachers and parents are vaccinated. The fact is that masking these kids in the heat is dangerous. The fact is that masking kids numbs their social interactions. And the main fact is that there is no scientific reason behind continuing this practice now, and certainly not in the fall. I'm asking to unmask my 4-year-old and give him back his childhood, and to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I cannot tell you the last time I have heard more effective testimony, more testimony from the heart than today. I'm sure that Nancy and Antwan agree. And I think part of it is no one's had an opportunity to be heard, and this has built up frustration over a long period of time. I'm just sad that, and I hope that the New Jersey media joins with me and says, listen, whether you agree or disagree with this fundamental issue, how can we silence mothers? You've heard mother after mother speak like this. How do we continue to keep them from expressing their opinions? You know that I'm a bipartisan person, but when it comes to transparency and allowing moms to speak, who can say no to allowing them to voice their opinion about their children? Nance, Antwan?
I couldn't agree more. I think this has been a really important session. I think that hearing directly from the parents in a very calm, scientific, but a sense that they see in their own children. Again, we're talking about data, which we heard the data. We're talking about experiences. We're hearing about what's happening to their children. And I think that this is critically important. I think that it has to get down to this kind of information because we're not hearing from the parents except for peripherally through, we might hear it on the radio where people are really really angry, but I think this is very important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman
I can't tell
McClellan?
you how many times we've asked our school board, our nurses, our superintendent, at least give us the data. And I think that that's what we keep hearing throughout this whole testimony and this whole meeting. Just explain, tell us how many outbreaks have occurred. For 1 week, we were allowed to unmask him outdoors for field day because of the extreme heat. So we asked, okay, did the threat go away for the week? Will it be back next week? It's completely arbitrary. It makes no sense. And my husband and I continue to just put this brave face on for our son because we don't want to give him our opinion on masking since he has to wear it all day, 6-7 hours a day. We just want answers. We're not inflammatory. We're not trying to bring emotion. It's a very simple scientific question and they will not answer. The answer is they simply will send me to the New Jersey Health page and this is what Murphy wants. And sorry, that's it. It's just kind of like, sorry, just kind of shut up and do what we tell you. And that's how we feel. And so many mothers feel this way. And many mothers are also almost afraid to come out and speak against the masking because they feel that they will be judged for speaking against the science. We're just asking.
Right. And I think your point is really important. Like how excessive heat, does that decrease transmission? We don't know that. We're just, as the person's young daughter said, going into a restaurant and then you take off the mask. Exactly. That doesn't make any sense. So you're absolutely right. It's like the data doesn't jive with the decisions that are being made.
No.
Assemblyman?
Right. We need to stop kicking the can down the road, and that's the problem. Is we don't have anybody that's making a forceful decision. So then the school boards and the superintendents are not making a decision because they're scared, and then that leaves the parents with no answers. So when you have elected officials or elected members to a school board, they're there to make a decision and not pass it off to somebody else. And that's the problem. We need to stop passing that decision off, whether it be to Dr. Fauci or some other doctor. We need to make the decision, and the decision should be to allow our parents to decide if their child should be masked or not. And that's
Yes.
all what the decision should be. So
Mhm.
hopefully Ari is doing well and he can have a great and fruitful summer, and then he'll be able to be unmasked for his year as a first grader, as opposed to it was as a preschooler. So,
Yes.
and
I hope so. We pray every day, so.
Thank you,
we-
Senator. Just one comment, that is, I hope that Governor Murphy listens to the women who've spoken so far, and here's
Oh,
my
me
message.
too.
Nobody sounded crazy. Nobody sounded vicious. Nobody sounded they were anti-science. So let's be clear. These are moms that are concerned about their kids. They simply want the stats. They simply want straight answers. None of them been mean-spirited. And I hope the New Jersey media is also listening. And once again, I call upon the legislature, let a bipartisan hearing go forward. Listen to these moms.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your articulate
Thank you.
testimony.
Appreciate it.
take care.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about maybe generally where you live. No home addresses. We don't need that. And tell us a little bit about your feelings about the masks.
Okay. My name is Ann. I am a stay-at-home mom. We're from Mercer County, Hamilton, New Jersey. I have 3 children, all with different knowledgeable disabilities. One is highly asthmatic. These masks have been a proven fact that they are no good. I have myself taken one of those blue doctor masks, the N39s, I think they're called. And at the end of the day, I have cut it in half just to see what color was inside the blue mask. It was brown. After I had it on myself for 20 minutes, the mask turned brown. These things are no good. They're not healthy for anybody. I don't even think the numbers are right. I don't even think this is a real virus. I think it was a plandemic, not a pandemic.
Well, we're not going to get into whether people really got sick, which obviously people did. Let's stay with the masks in the schools if we could, because what we'll do is if we start to have comments off topic, what's going to happen is, I believe, people who are against what we're doing are going to take those comments as opposed to the comments related to children and masks in schools. So, and that's the first thing opponents will do who want to reject the mom's testimony. So let's stay with masks in school if we can.
Okay. Our schools here in Hamilton are very, very old. I graduated from the same high school that my son, who is now a senior, we attended the same high school. These schools don't even have air conditioning in them. For the last couple of days here in Hamilton, it's been 90 something degrees, and they're making these kids wear those masks. My daughter herself is now suffering from migraines because she's wearing them with heat, no air conditioning in the classroom. None of our schools have air conditionings, not even window fans, nothing. Our superintendent, Dr. Rocco, is very not responsive at all. He doesn't respond to anybody's messages. A lot of parents are highly upset. It's not easy for, I don't even know how to put this. It's not easy for a mom like myself with my children having different knowledgeable disabilities. They're not wheelchair bound, but it's a mental brain shutdown disability. It's hard. I did the virtual thing for 1.5 years, and now I'm on antidepressants because of it. So, even though my kids have IEPs, I've had to put in their IEPs that they cannot wear them just because of their disabilities, and they don't care. They don't want to hear it. They basically pushed my comments aside and said, "You don't exist." Well, how doesn't my comments exist? These are my children. They came from my stomach, my body, my decision, my choice. So where does everybody think these masks are going to save lives? Because they're not. They're making it worse. I'm sorry if anybody feels differently than I do, but that's, that's where I stand. That's how I think of it.
Well, we really appreciate it. We have a few, we're gonna, at 11:45, we're gonna end this hearing. That's why I want to move on. But listen, Ann, I appreciate it. I'm hoping that people are listening in Trenton, and we will continue to fight. So statistics come out and we make sure we do the best we can to make sure the message gets out of the moms who've been basically silenced. Can we take the next witness, please?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ann.
Thank
Thank
Ann.
you. Have a nice day.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, we can,
You
yeah.
know, behind you, it looked like a recording studio. It's just high-tech refrigerators and microwaves. I thought you were coming
Yeah.
from a spaceship. Looks like you just did the kitchen, as we say. Anyway,
This is the only quiet place I have right now.
Erin, if you would tell us a little about yourself, and then please, if you would, give us your testimony that hopefully people in Trenton and the governor will hear.
Okay. So I am a school nurse. I've been working as a school nurse in Stafford Township, New Jersey. And I've witnessed a lot of harm to these children due to the masks on a multifactorial level. So I've seen these children being harmed emotionally, physically, and developmentally. I've treated them all year long, and this is a big problem. Children are not concerned with wearing a mask properly. The CDC has put a study out in May of 2020 that said proper use is essential. Proper use of face masks is essential because improper use can actually increase the spread of infection of influenza-like illness. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing these children, wearing the masks completely, grossly incorrectly, wearing them for weeks on end. They're completely filthy. I had one child come to me and he had the mask, a bandana type mask tied around his neck. And he came into the nurse's office saying, "I can't breathe in this mask." So we tried to take it off of him. We couldn't. He said he'd been wearing that same mask tied to his neck for 2 weeks. We literally had to cut it off with scissors. So this is not the proper use of a face mask. Children.
Oh dear, you froze.
Oh.
There you go. You're back.
For that reason, children are not, they're having cross-contamination to their masks. And we know that bacteria is much larger than viruses. A single viron of COVID-19 virus is 0.1 microns. Well, bacteria is much larger and it can't come through the pores like they can and like viruses can. So they get clogged up in the mask. And that's what is sitting on your child's face for 7 to 8 hours a day while they're in school, or longer if they're in after school sports and running around in this dirty mask all day long. I mean, I've seen acne, rashes, sores behind the ears, even lip canker sores. Doctors have said there's an increase in strep throat. This has a potential to cause fatal pneumonia for children. This is very serious. And it's not just a mask that you put on your face. N95 masks are supposed to be worn. They're supposed to be worn by medical professionals in the hospital. And those professionals are fit tested for those N95 masks. It's not just plop it on your face and wear it. You have to have it suction to not suction, but fit correctly to your face so that it fits. Then you go for a yearly in-service where they spray on you. They make sure it fits right. If you can smell the spray, well, that's not the right fit for you. We need a different fit. So these children who are coming to school with their N95 thinking that this is protecting them, their parents think it's protecting them. It's not. And I want the governor to know this is not the way that masks were meant to be worn. This is not protecting children. This is harming children. There's been multiple scientific studies that show that these masks are harmful to children. And, just that same study that I talked about earlier, the 2020 May from the CDC, found that there was no significant reduction in influenza-like illness with the use of these face masks. So what's the reason that we're doing this? Is this about the science or is this about compliance? This is not okay to be doing this to our children. You know, I've seen other children come in. I had one little girl, she walked down to me, she threw up in class and she was wearing her mask. When she got to me, she sat down in the chair, and I was dealing with another student for a second, taking care of his recessed wound. And when I got to her, I said, all right, let's take off your mask and what's going on? And it was completely filled with vomit. She wore this mask from her class down the hall in tears, wearing this vomit-filled mask because she thought she had to. I mean, we're inducing anxiety, fear, depression. I've had new children in elementary ages coming down with depression and anxiety, in like kindergarten, first graders with depression and anxiety. This is not okay, especially for a virus that mostly is not going to affect children. You have a 99.997% survival rate. And not only that, if they are infected, they're going to have mostly mild symptoms.
You were trained as a school nurse. Can you just tell us what educational background do you have that allowed you to be a school nurse?
I'm a baccalaureate degree nurse. I went to school at William Patterson University. I graduated in 2009. I've worked in all different kinds of nursing settings. I've done pediatrics, labor and delivery. I've done med surg in the hospital. I've worked home care. I've done nursing management. And for the last 4 years, I've been a school nurse. And this year has been really horrible with these masks. It's not effective and it's harming these children. You know, another thing I didn't talk about is the developmental harm that I'm seeing. You know, these children need to learn how to see and express to each other. They can't tell that their teacher is pleased with them because they can't see her face. They can't tell that their friend is upset with them because they don't know that, oh, taking that toy away from my friend makes them upset, because they don't understand that that's body language that they're supposed to learn at a young age. Not to mention children who are hard of hearing. A lot of times children aren't diagnosed with this disorder until later on in life, and they don't even realize that they're learning to read lips. And now they're having a problem with their education and they can't learn and they can't understand what's going on because they don't even understand that now, why can't I communicate anymore? I can't read your lips. This is a major problem. You know, I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just a mask, we'll put it on, it doesn't bother me. Well, it does bother these children. They are in school for 6 or 7 hours a day. You get to go to work, sit at your desk and take your mask off. You get to go to the grocery store, run in the store, run out, get back out and take it off. These kids cannot. And all day long, it's pull the mask up, pull the mask up. Meanwhile, the principal and the secretary is in the office and they don't have their mask on unless a child comes in and then they pull it back on. It doesn't make sense. These children are not at risk for serious harm from COVID-19 if they are infected. And if teachers or staff in the schools want to become vaccinated, that's their choice. That should not be forced on children because they aren't affected by COVID-19. The risks from this vaccine, it's brand new and it shouldn't be forced on children. So that's another thing that we need to talk about going forward, because that should not be a condition to open schools in the fall or to take these masks off the children.
Understood. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any questions from Assemblywoman Muñoz or Assemblyman McClellan?
I think you make a really good point about the filth of the masks. I think I tried to get the message out early on to everybody I saw that masks should be treated like underwear, changed every day. You know, you can wash them out before you go to bed at night. I mean, the people are wearing masks incorrectly, and the filth of the masks is like an appalling issue to me. I mean, you don't need to have access to a washer and dryer to do it. You just, before they go to bed, you wash it in the sink with soap. We know soap works, you know, and so it's like, I think we could have done a better public health job with that, about like that, keeping that dirt around your face is really awful. But I thank you, I appreciate it. I say, again, we stress the physical issue, the mental health issue, and the data issue. And all these components put together don't make sense. So thank you very much, Erin.
Yes.
McClellan, anything to add?
Yeah, Erin, I just want to say thank you very much for giving a little bit of a different perspective, because, you know, especially with the N95s, everybody was all, we need an N95, we need an N95, but you're not wearing it properly and it's not necessarily fitting to your face. And then you have an ability to get stuff around and in and all that stuff because it's not fitted correctly. And then also, you know, with the reusable masks, if you're not washing them out every day, as Assemblywoman Muñoz said, then what's the point? And then the disposable masks, you shouldn't continue to put those on. They're disposable. So this is a one-time wear, and then you should be going out, and there's no education on that either. But then you
Yeah.
still focus on your kid, and you allow your kid to wear that same mask all week long for 8 hours a day, which is just completely unfair.
Yes, I just want to say one more thing about the cloth masks, because we're seeing a lot of these kids coming in cloth masks, and there was Vietnamese workers were found to be 13 times more likely, and these are healthcare workers in the hospital, 13 times more likely to come down with an virus when they're wearing a cloth mask. So the surgical masks don't work. The cloth masks don't work. The N95 masks don't work. These don't work, but they do work at harming our children emotionally, physically, and developmentally, and it needs to stop now.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for your
Thank you,
time.
Aaron.
Appreciate your articulate
you.
testimony.
Bye-bye.
Hello,
Good morning. It says Kyle.
that's me. Yep.
We had a Nick, an NIK, and a Kyle to make sure it's yours. Okay. Kyle, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you go right into your either concerns or support of masks.
Sure. My name is Kyle Roberts. I am a married mother of 4. I have 3 stepchildren and 1 biological son. I work full-time. I'm the head of people at a tech company in New York City. And I am, after 15 months, still struggle to appropriately navigate this pandemic and in a way that doesn't, psychologically and physically harm my 6-year-old son. I'm sure all of you have children at this age. You get, at least 100 questions of why every day, right? So those why this, why that questions are hard to answer when you yourself don't believe in everything that's going on or really understand why one thing makes sense over here but doesn't make sense over there. So I'll go right into my testimony if that's okay.
Of course, please.
Also, I've been a New Jersey resident for 13 years. My husband and I, John Roberts is my husband, have been residents. He's been a resident of New Jersey for over 13 years. So first, I want to thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I am testifying on behalf of my 6-year-old son, Michael, as well as all children still being forced to mask their faces in school and public venues across New Jersey. 15 months ago, the COVID pandemic turned our lives upside down. When the pandemic first broke out, my son, 4 years old at the time, was abruptly told he would not be able to finish his preschool year. He would not be able to see anyone but my husband and I for months. Understanding the need to quarantine and keep him safe, I did my best to explain the abrupt change to him in a way that still protected his innocence and carefree approach to life, an approach that he and all children deserve to maintain for as long as possible. We followed all the CDC and local health guidelines throughout the summer, not interacting with friends or family, and limiting what used to be seen by my son as normal everyday activities. He celebrated his 5th birthday via a Zoom video call. We didn't go to the playground. We didn't go to the zoo. We didn't go to the beach. We didn't have play dates. We didn't see aunts or uncles or grandma or grandpa. After 6 months of strict quarantine, I was grateful to find out his school would be able to offer in-person learning for the kindergarten year, a critical year for social and emotional development. The only sacrifice my son would have to make as a way to recognize that in-person experience was to wear a mask over his face for 6.5 hours straight, Monday through Friday, from 8:30 to 3 p.m., including while outside at recess, with only a 30-minute break for lunch. I conformed to the school policy and put that mask on his face each morning before he walked away from my car into the school to nurture his 5-year-old natural eagerness to learn and connect with his peers. It was my duty as his mother to explain to him that wearing a mask over his face was required to keep him safe when he was anywhere but inside the walls of our home. But that was then. That was 15 months ago. That was before I and we know much more about the virus, particularly that there is little to no risk of COVID spread outdoors. And regardless of indoors or out, children are half as likely to contract or transmit the virus than adults. That was before I and we know that only 20% of those that did contract the virus showed clinical symptoms or needed medical intervention. That was before I and we know that as of today, over 50% of New Jersey residents have been fully vaccinated, which significantly lowers the risk of spread, the need for hospitalization, and overall mortality rates. That was before Governor Murphy's most recent executive order, dated June 7th, 2021, which allows for a lift on masks at outdoor summer camps. But yet my son is still required to mask his face for 6.5 hours a day for the remainder of the school year, including while outside at recess. And yes, every day matters. I know there's only 6 days left in the year, but every day matters. And he and all other children are required, even under this executive order, to mask their faces at indoor summer camps. And there has been no indication that children will be able to attend school mask-free in September. This is all regardless of the data and the knowledge we have of the virus today. I was willing to conform before I started seeing adults continuously allow themselves the freedom of a mask-free life while looking directly at and talking to my son and other children muzzled. On June 9th, for example, Mayor Kobolars of Chatham Borough and his deputy counsel, Carolyn Dempsey, comfortably mask-free on an 87-degree day, held a Q&A for a group of third graders outside at Borough Hall. Again, Mayor Kobolars and Carolyn Dempsey wore no mask on their faces and stood there talking to children masked in the heat outside. That is not only hypocrisy at its finest, but it is pure and simple child abuse. Another example of why I'm no longer willing to conform and be silenced. I've received no less than 3 letters in the mail over the past 4 months from my son's school director at the Montessori Children's Academy in Chatham, reminding me of the policy that everyone, including teachers, parents, and children, must wear masks on their faces at all times while on school property, including at drop-off and pickup. But yet that same director stands on school property every single morning, mask-free.
Okay, here's my only comment here. You know, the issue here is, I don't want to get into an argument within a specific school, right? I understand the inconsistency, but what we need to do here is convince the governor or the majority in the legislature that masks in school don't work. The fact that a principal or a headmaster is inconsistent, I get that, but I don't think that's the drive. The driving point is how it affects your children, how it affects other children, whether it's a medical necessity. Because I think once we go off on that tangent, and I apologize, I use tangent, the issue is if the executive order was changed, you wouldn't have any inconsistencies. So I don't want to get into the Montessori school, who's right and who's wrong, because this is more about state mandate.
That's fine. I have more to say about the in-school
The
effects.
effect to your children, the effect on you, and whether or not you believe it's a necessary part of the medical needs. That's really what we're looking
Yeah.
for.
Well, okay. So I will move on from my examples. My son, but I will say, you know, my son is able to walk into a restaurant and remove his mask while at the table for as long as it takes to finish our meal, comfortably conversing with each other at our leisure inside. But yet, even though there are plexiglass dividers between him and his schoolmates at their desk, he is required to keep his mask on his face for the entire 6.5 hours of his day at school, even while outside at recess. I don't think COVID is different in the air in the restaurants than it is in the air in the schools. I see the psychological impact of what my son having to mask his face has done to him. My son has become hesitant and less confident in himself when outside our home. He has a sense of fear about the world around him that he should not have at this age. He even once ran to me asking me to please ask his babysitter, whom he's known for over 4 years and sees regularly, to take her mask off. It clearly causes stress, distrust, and fear. He has spent his entire kindergarten year not seeing his teacher smile when he demonstrates a new skill at school, which is crucial in the development of confidence, pride, creativity, and independence. My son has spent a year not seeing his friends smile at him when he gets up the courage to answer a question in school, or when he provides support to them as a mentor while they are learning things he has already mastered. In not seeing their smile or facial expression, it lessens the reinforcement on his development of empathy and leadership. It is a scientific fact that exposure to facial cues and facial expression is important to a child's brain development, and that it helps develop skills that allow children to share and adopt emotions with their relatives and peers. And every day that we require our children to mask their faces in academic and social settings, we inhibit that brain development. Children rely on others' faces to help them navigate their social environment. We already have issues with social development with technology. We're only making that worse by masking their faces in school.
Well,
I'll just finish with, we know more about the virus today than we did before. There is little to no risk of COVID spread between children. Children are known to not transmit it, to contract it or transmit it at the rate that adults do. And given that over 50% of New Jersey residents are fully vaccinated, I don't understand why we can't make adjustments to the mask mandate in schools. I feel that my son must be given the freedom of a mask-free life, and I ask you to please give me, his mother, the freedom of making the choice as to whether to mask his face or not, based on all the science and data publicly available to me.
Kyle, what you've said and other moms today, is so extremely effective. The real question becomes, are you getting answers from Trenton to your questions? Because Trenton is setting these policies, but there has been no hearing where they answer your questions. And we're hoping that when Trenton, including our governor, hears the passion of the moms, the issues raised by a school nurse, that they will answer these questions. And that's the only way, in my judgment, we can move forward on this issue. We're going to bring in, I'm deeply thankful for your time today. We're going to bring in some other members of the public all at once. So when we end at 11:45, that we hear from everybody. But once again, thank you so much. Everyone's testified today has touched our hearts. Once again, there is this argument of science driving these decisions, but so far we haven't seen substantial science with respect to children and masks. And that's why we're having these hearings. And that's why we're hoping we see a change coming out of Trenton. Thank you so much for your effective testimony. And now we're going
Thank
to
you
move
for
on.
giving me the time to speak.
Thank you, Kyle.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we're bringing in a number of witnesses here. And once again, we apologize because we thought we could limit testimony to a few minutes. And I have to tell you, and I'm pretty good at limiting testimony, as Nancy and Antwan knows. When you hear a mom talking from their heart, even I, as a trial lawyer, have a tough time interrupting the testimony today. I mean, when you're talking about your kids and some politician says that's enough, I couldn't do it. So what I'd like to do with, I see Susan and Kerry, and I don't know, we have some others or just two people?
There's 5.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not too good at moving it. So what we'd like to do is we've heard a lot of different issues with respect to psychological development, mouth and skin problems, the fact that children are developing more slowly. If any of you would like to talk about an issue you have not heard yet or something you'd like to say to Trenton, please, Kerry's got her hand up as we do in school, or at least we used to do in school. Kerry, please.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have a special needs child as well. He was born with spina bifida. I also have a 16-year-old high school student. My son that has spina bifida has a latex allergy. He can't wear any of the masks.
How do I raise my hand?
So
Could everybody mute their phones except for Carrie who's speaking because it's an echo? If just asking you that, thank you.
So he was born with a latex allergy just because of all the surgeries he'll have throughout his life. He just becomes naturally prone to having a reaction from latex. He's had one in his life and we'd care to not repeat it. We've submitted letters of medical exemption for my son. He also wears leg braces that go all the way up his legs, which means he cannot regulate his body heat. So on an 84-degree day, my son sweats profusely. Wearing a mask and sweating like that, it puts him at such a high risk. Medically. I've submitted letters of medical exemption to my district. They don't care. They told me we have remote as an option, so he can just learn remotely. The issue with remote is he has an IEP, so he has modifications and accommodations that are supposed to be met through that IEP, and they're not doing that. Now I have a little advantage. I'm a special education advocate because I've had to fight for him for so long, but I'm now getting an outpouring of phone calls, emails, text messages from families who are saying, my kid's experiencing that. So I'm now volunteering my time to help parents file due process, file state complaints, file civil rights complaints, because this is affecting the special needs community so much greater than anybody can ever imagine. Our kids require seeing faces. That's how they learn. My kid needs an auditory and a visual way of learning. He can't do that on a computer. We've been denied textbooks at home. I had to fight for textbooks because he can't just read from a computer screen. So if the mask mandate is happening again in September, and they're also removing remote instruction, what are our kids going to do? My son medically cannot wear a mask. It is detrimental to his health. My other son has asthma and can't wear one as well. He wore it once and passed out. So this is now a medical thing that a lot of people just don't seem to understand. And getting a doctor to write a medical exemption letter, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. I have doctors at CHOP that won't write medical exemption letters. So we ended up going down to Delaware to DuPont to find a specialist. So it's just become, and there is a medical exemption clause in the executive order. So I don't understand why this is becoming such an issue.
Just real quick, it'd be nice if we had the health commissioner, Judy Persicelli, do this and answer the questions of the moms, because she is at the press conference answering questions of the media. I mean, it'd be very nice to hear your question, Kerry, and listen to the health commissioner respond to that. I believe that Susan's next. Susan's on mute. I think there's one Susan.
Hello,
Madison. Yes, please.
can you hear
Yes,
me?
yeah.
We can
Yes.
perfectly.
Hi, my name's Susan Madison. I'm from Ridgewood, New Jersey. I had a lot of remarks which basically echoed most of what you heard. I'm glad that you brought in Erin Pine. I think what she has to say about the downsides of masks needs to be listened to. Since we're on limited time, the thing I want to bring up is the elephant in the room. I think we have to acknowledge the role that the NJEA is playing in these protocols in our school. That includes masking, that includes contact tracing, that includes social distancing. Just yesterday, a number of United States Republican senators sent a letter to the director of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky. They want to get a lot more information about how the national teachers unions influenced the CDC's guidance for K-12 school reopenings. We need to do the same exact thing in New Jersey. You need to go in, you need to find out what the NJEA has done in driving policy in our schools. Just as one example, I'm sure you're all aware of some of the money coming from Washington under the American Rescue Plan. Every school district in the nation had to provide a back to school plan in order to qualify for those dollars. I pulled up the back to school template for the state of Georgia. It was full of how they were going to use those dollars to help their children. I pulled up the template for New Jersey. It's a bunch of questions of how we're going to continue masking. Number 1 point, masking. Number 2 point, contact tracing. Number 3, social distancing. Enough. You guys need to expose it. It's the only way this is going to end in New Jersey. And I guess the final piece of advice I have for you is that, Jack Ciattarelli won the primary for the Republican primary for governor yesterday or 2 days ago. He said the number 1 issue facing New Jersey is property taxes. It is not the number 1 issue. The number 1 issue facing New Jersey is the destruction of our public schools, which is happening under the unholy alliance of Governor Murphy and the NJEA. I am a registered Democrat, and I am telling you, I will walk over fire to vote against Governor Murphy because of the way he has treated my children for the last year. You need to stand up and you need to expose these unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It's Brianna, go ahead.
It's Brianne.
Goes Brianne.
Yes, I've been getting it my whole life. It's okay. Yes. My name is Brianne Zelensky. I'm from Middletown Township, hometown of Governor Murphy. All 3 of my daughters have speech IEPs, so they all depend on tongue and lip placement from the teachers and peers. So pretty much this whole year has been one huge roadblock for them. My youngest daughter, she's in preschool. She has the most severe speech disorder out of all of them. It's called apraxia. So it's actually a neurological disorder. But our pediatrician won't write a medical exemption because he wasn't the one that diagnosed it. The only ones that could diagnose that are speech pathologists. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean anything to Governor Murphy, coming from a well-trained speech pathologist. My pediatrician actually told me that if my daughter is having a hard time practicing speech with her mask on, then maybe I should practice more at home with her mask on. That's what the answer I got. But I really want to focus on my daughter in kindergarten. She is the light in this dark world. She truly cares about everyone. She just wants everyone to be happy. Pre-COVID, all I heard was just how she includes everyone. She's very empathetic. She sees someone down, she picks them up. A couple months ago, I could see her starting to break down. She shared with me that it was actually hard for her to help people because she didn't know which friends needed help because she couldn't see their faces. As weeks went on, I saw her light was dimming. It was more and more. And one day she just hit her breaking point. One day she came home from school and she asked to go to her room. So I gave her a couple minutes and I went to go check on her. And I have some audio that I would like to share with you. This is what happened.
I can't even hear because my plexiglass. I couldn't even hear her.
And it's dirty?
No, I can't even hear her.
I know, but is the glass clean or is it dirty?
Dirty, so I can't see.
And why are you just telling me this now, Quinn? Has it been like this like a long time?
Yeah. I always forget to tell you.
Well, these are the things you need to tell mommy so I can help, okay?
Give me headache, and I can't even hear my friends say.
You get headaches? How often do you get headaches?
Like the whole day.
You get headaches every single day? Quinn, this is something that you need to tell mommy. Why haven't you told mommy this before?
I always forget.
Well, it's something you can't forget, honey, okay? Because that's not good. That's not a good thing.
I can't even, because when I was talking, I couldn't even hear my friend say today. I couldn't even hear her. She was like saying something to me and I couldn't even hear her.
So she didn't tell me for months she was having headaches or every day.
I don't think you need to add to that testimony.
Okay. It's pretty much self-explanatory, but
You know,
I just want to say to Governor Murphy, if he's watching, on behalf of many parents from Middletown Township, his hometown, we've had enough. We believe in the Constitution of the United States of America, and we are ready to fight, and we will not be complacent, especially this summer.
what's your daughter's name?
That one was Quinn.
Any other comments?
That's it. We're ready to fight. We're ready to fight for our children, take back our rights.
I don't know, but to me, I'd be happy to end this testimony based on Gwen. Is it Gwen?
Quinn with a Q.
Quinn.
Nancy?
I was going to say, I think that what we've heard today is the anguish of the parents, all mothers, but certainly the fathers have the same exact sentiment. This is an issue that we have to address. We've heard loud and clear that like the physicians feel handcuffed by fear and that they need to be released from that fear. And that we know that 70% of the population, they're bragging, has been vaccinated. That was the goal we met. We've met our goals, and now we're seeing the harm to the children. We need to make sure that I think John, Antwan, and I will make sure that we put this together in some form of a letter, get this to governor's office. Your voices were heard loud and clear. And every single one of you had a compelling story to tell about your child and the impact that this is having. And that is just reverberates out 1,000-fold and 1,000 again and again. And so we hear you, and we're going to do what we can to make sure your message gets to the right people. Let's hope that as a result of that something can be done. But we've already, over the course of this 2 hours, have heard things that we know that we can put forward and hope to help all of you. We, you know, when it's your child, it's 100%. Yeah, we have a saying in healthcare, and that's what we're hearing. So thank you.
Well, I heard from Quinn, so I'm pretty much done. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think, is it Ms. Howe or Kristen? You're there, you waited. If you want to add something, it's fine. But I got to tell you, is 40 years of trial lawyer, and if that's a closing statement from Quinn, to be perfectly honest with you, that would be my closing statement. I mean, once again, I don't want to silence Kristen, or I have D. Howe there. I don't know what your first name is.
My name is Dory.
Dory, please go ahead.
No, really, that was just absolutely horrifying. So I really, you know, my story would mimic a lot of the other parents. I have a daughter who has asthma, you know, inattentive ADHD, IEP, and pretty much what everybody else is going to say. The only thing I will say, because there's really not much I can add, and that was probably one of the saddest things I've ever heard. The only thing I would add is that I am no longer complying. When my daughter goes back to school in September, she will not be wearing masks. Her chest is not going to hurt anymore from her asthma and wearing a mask. And if the school will not let her in, then I'll take the legal action that I need to take. I no longer consent to the abuse of my child.
Kristen, anything to say?
It's hard to follow that. I'm on 100% agreement. And I guess my concern as a parent would be that there are other children like Quinn, could be my kids too, that maybe they're not speaking up, because what this is doing, our reality is skewed, right? We can go to any store or restaurant that doesn't require masks and not wear a mask, yet they have to go to school with masks on. But there's no logic in that. They're smart. These kids are smart enough to know it doesn't make sense. And so what my concern is that this message is, don't question authority. Don't question what you're told. And the very people that they're supposed to be trusting, their teachers, the school, are giving them a false idea of reality. And so there are other children like Quinn out there, and I'm still tearing up from hearing that are not telling their parents about how they're feeling, because they're getting this message, don't question it. So that's really all I have to say. And on behalf of my 6-year-old son, Roman, he wanted me to say he can't breathe at school. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to close the hearing, but I'm saying to the majority in the legislature and to the governor, let the people speak. Look, you want to make another decision against what these moms said, answer their questions. Let them speak. Let Quinn's voice be heard. I'm going to close the hearing.